Hello everyone, today I'm going to discuss with you the critical success factors for a project involving artificial intelligence in conversations with a CRM in the way we've been serving various clients, suppliers, colleagues who have also been working with our widget called ByteGPT, which connects a CRM Kommo to other artificial intelligence providers like OpenAI, orchestrators like Dify, among others. So the idea here is to share some experiences from hundreds of projects being implemented, from numerous support services provided by our technical support, to bring some of our impressions to reflect a bit on some aspects that are important for the success of this type of project. So our target audience is both the technical staff who implement it, as well as professional companies that are making a decision to use this type of project in their business, so they have some points of attention. So we have separated here into some sections involving commercial aspects about the tool like ByteGPT itself, and also about artificial intelligence. So I'm going to briefly go through each of them. I have no intention of exhausting the subject or delving into each item, but to provide an overview and also to reflect on the essence, since this can be constantly changed. Maybe next week when I record this video, or tomorrow, we already have changes, new developments, as we are used to, accustomed in this area involving artificial intelligence. This video is being recorded in September 2024. When you watch it, it's important to consider some tools, methods, new developments that may have emerged in the meantime. So about the commercial aspects. In commercial aspects, we have noticed a difficulty among some partners, some colleagues, companies in the actual commercial proposal. Having a difficulty in setting deadlines and prices in an underestimated or mistaken way. And then we also notice these estimates are often not very accurate. This compromises the quality of the project. There are also the deliveries and client expectations, where sometimes high expectations associated with a mistaken sale can compromise the quality of the project. And we also see a difficulty in the quality of delivery due to business needs. While sometimes there is a very easy, very quick impression, it does require technical depth and analysis, as we will see here later on. And then another very common point we attribute is this side of delegating, attributing to artificial intelligence, often to human intelligence, business intelligence. So conversational intelligence comes from those who implement it, who are involved, both the business owner and also the one who is at the forefront of its implementation. And there are also some points that are underestimated. And these underestimated items, which I could classify as, for example, we underestimate human intelligence in the process, human participation in the process, which is the actual business intelligence. We also underestimate the client's involvement in the process. The client does need to participate precisely by clarifying the vision of this part of the business rules. The number of tests conducted is often far below what it should be, so there is an anxiety to deliver the project, to see it working. We test, it seems to be working, but we don't test all the adverse situations that occur in conversations, all the possible business rules or situations, as mentioned here, adverse, and this also compromises quality. And then we often underestimate optimization as an evolutionary process, because constant optimizations are inherent to the evolutionary process from conversations, situations, this feedback loop. So the project doesn't necessarily end when we deliver it. In truth, we deliver, and then another phase begins, which is the maintenance phase, the evolution phase characteristic of the development cycle of any software. We also end up underestimating the technical complexity involved in the demands of AI, artificial intelligence. And it's not always a problem with ByteGPT or the tool, because ByteGPT is just a connector, but we underestimate the technical capacity or experience of those who are acting. Sometimes we hire or carry out projects in a somewhat uninformed way, and then we get a bit complicated with the real situations that may arise. Which is exactly this request, which is not having people sometimes properly qualified or experienced partners in the process with the proper experience and artificial intelligence. Another point then that we will see is regarding the CRM Kommo. We draw attention to the plans, right? Advanced, enterprise to function. The basic one doesn't work because it doesn't have automations like Salesbot. And involving Salesbots, the critical success factor is having full mastery over the Salesbots. Knowing well how to handle the use of Salesbots, because you can use best practices, understand conditions well, the stages of conditions that can lead you to save points, different routes, know how to define the fields, the actions you want in there. You can also have the importance of respecting the timing of each point in terms of timers, since there are some processes and actions that need, for example, the need to update a field and a time for that. Sometimes you place two subsequent stages and you end up losing the information or waiting for a loop to be completed. You necessarily also need to pay attention to this process, be attentive to the programming logic, because Salesbots is a no-code programming, or it can even be low-code if you want to use some codes there, as it is also possible, but it is a programming logic on top of the business, and then you have multiple Salesbots or not. The relationship between them and this point of handling this knack with your bots is a critical success factor, as well as knowing well the business rules. The business rule of what you are implementing requires you to reflect on this conversational flow, on the business rules, on the logic, knowing precisely how to translate the business rules to your bots. That's the point. It's not artificial intelligence that does this. Artificial intelligence is a technology, a technological resource that infers possibilities, but the one who brings the business logic is still the human. Artificial intelligence assists in this point. It allows certain questions to be made, but still the one who makes the conversational logic is human intelligence. So it's important to know the limitations of Kommo, because it's not a perfect CRM, as there is no perfect one. There are limitations, such as, for example, you can't use two of your bots concurrently. Maybe this will change. Maybe it has already changed when you watch this video. We have a process of requests really happening. There are limitations of the resources themselves and stages of what can be done, what cannot be done, what can be used in conditions. So knowing the limits well, you also know how to better adjust the business rule within your bots. And also a critical point is sometimes the professional not knowing how to expand the possibilities with webhooks. You can use external webhooks, that is, with external connections, an internal webhook, but using external data, doing update leads, launch sales bots. You can trigger an external action from a JSON if you have a webhook within here in your bots. We do this here at ByteBio. We work in a way associated with orchestrators that we do this two-way intercommunication and not just using a single bot to do everything. And so you have several other ways. So let's take a look now regarding ByteGPT. So ByteGPT is a connector. It's a widget that connects Kommo to GPT providers like OpenAI, orchestrators of GPTs and LLMs like Dify, through which you can connect to other tools. You can have another type of internal flow of integrations and applications, and that also expands to other providers besides OpenAI. You can also connect to another service, which is chat-based, and it allows multiple connections. You can have various handlers within your Salesbots. That's ByteGPT. Now, ByteGPT, to make it easier, we deliver a Salesbot model where you have access to the handlers. What are webhooks that can be associated with the providers we saw above? So we also connect to ChatGPT isolated from an assistant. We can connect to assistants, probably said both from OpenAI or within OpenAI, you can have several assistants inside it. And sometimes not knowing this can also be a critical factor for your project, because you sometimes use just one assistant and want to solve everything with that single assistant that has a giant instruction, that has files, and wants everyone in your company's workflow to be resolved in this single assistant from an OpenAI, for example. So this is very limited. This ends up being really very closed within the possibilities. So opening this requires building flows, building specific assistants, and this opens up possibilities, makes us move away from this situation of having project criticality. Another important point is that, in fact, you should adapt the template to your business and not adapt the business to the ByteGPT template. This is another critical point that happens. We notice that many people try to use all the business rules of their company from the proposed template. And on the contrary, you have the ability to shape your bots according to your needs. So it's just a template, it's a suggestion, a starting model. And the ability then to extrapolate this is what comes into the commercial issues we mentioned earlier about how important it is to know how to estimate. Knowing and experience bring greater accuracy in this aspect of estimates. And then it really requires knowledge about your bots, about how for you to handle this very well. So about common problems, we will see that it also ends up compromising the quality, the relationship you have with the client, with the expectation itself, with the enthusiasm that the developer, implementer anyway, is having with all this set. Sometimes the plan expired and things don't work. Sometimes there is instability in OpenAI. It is important for us to always look at the URL, their status.openai.com, which shows how the situation is in real time. The widget also ends up presenting a line there in the widget itself, the current status. We also have this view that there are two flows working. There are simultaneous triggers being fired in Kommo CRM. This makes Kommo itself disarm, because at the moment I record the video, it is still not possible for you to have two of your bots working concurrently depending on the type of action taken. Another very common point is having differences in the API of a project with an assistant. You sometimes use an API in OpenAI from another project of OpenAI itself that is associated with another assistant. Today, if you observe, you have the organization project. Within the project, you have the assistant of that project, keys of that project. It is very common for people to use a generic key they have there, and then the API cannot function. All of this is documented in our support bytebio.com section. The same thing happens when unintentionally or intentionally or inadvertently the user revokes the authorization. There is an authorization settings environment within the widget. Often, as I said, it can be accidental or not. The person goes there and revokes. They cancel the user's API permission, and then there is nothing to do. Our API cannot communicate adequately with your environment because your user revoked this permission. It is also very common for this to happen. And another critical point is the low technical qualification or inexperience of implementers. We see that maybe there is not yet a run with the LLM, even though it has existed for a short time in the world, but enough experience to do the project and also not much handling with your bots. And conversational intelligence is also something that does not have much dedication. And we focus only on making it work, but underestimate, as we saw earlier, these points. And then it is also a common problem. Of course, we have our technical support, which pays attention to the technical issues of problems that may occur with ByteGPT. And we know how to separate this into services because it is very common for people to seek support actually asking for implementations. And the implementations, although ByteBU can assist them, characterize service for us, characterizes the challenge of your project. The ticket, or a request, is for us to check if there was any problem with the payment, an activation, a suspension, or to check why something is not working, if it is happening. We assist you in this process, but there is a limit to the functioning of ByteGPT and the technical challenges, the project challenges that are brought to us. Often it is of another nature. It is about artificial intelligence difficulty of the own how, difficulty of the own sales bots, how to program a certain situation. And this, yes, requires an unfolding of our part and involvement so that we can then assist you with a scheduled hour at a time that is opportune so that there is then sometimes the best possible delivery. And this, yes, can also have charges if accepted and agreed previously. And finally, aspects related to artificial intelligence. So, see, the first point is for us to really understand or comprehend the base of the LLM, the basic concepts and base for good functioning. A critical factor here is that often the instructions are not clear. They need conversational context. They need to be, for example, in an XML tag, in a tag structure that improves by up to 20% to 30%. So instructions are a fundamental point, and instead of placing an assistant with all the instructions, we suggest having specific instructions with micro LLM, with micro assistants running for each situation, for each conversation context. So you have an idea of the conversation context and specific instructions for that context. What is context? I don't mean knowledge context, it's conversation context. For example, I am in an initial greeting where I have instructions about greeting. If I go to a sales part, why not have an assistant, a micro LLM that guides just that? The sales part is possible, then having all the general instructions, and then I can have question classifiers that make me have this more specific maneuver. Another point that is an important discipline here of knowledge is the contents, the quality of the contents for retrieval, which is the search we will see further down here in other data sources different from the AI itself. We have different sources, files, Notion, a database of pages, doing a web scraper, and you knowing how to manage this well. It is very important, as well as access to databases, so that you resort to the precise data rather than simply throwing a bunch of docs or PDF and wanting the AI to solve the situation. So prompts are also another very important point. In fact, before prompts, there is the management of these contents, so that we have a notion of which LLM is running, or rather in which assistant it is running, a versioning management of this, since the information can have a certain dynamic. Prompts have everything to do with the relationship with the models I am using. Each model reacts in a different way to certain types of prompts, the size of the prompt engineering, which sometimes I don't need to do a zero shot, to send an open question for me to answer. I can elaborate better, make a kind of breakdown as if they were agents returning the information to me in a more precise way. This is also a point that infers a lot of quality in the process, and it reduces any criticality of complaints or problems. These prompts, therefore, are also associated with the tokens related to the model. There's the context window size, you have the input, the number of input tokens, output tokens, knowing how to manage this both for costs and efficiency of response. What you are putting to work sometimes has huge instructions with a simple good morning. You sometimes run 7,000 tokens to be able to respond to a good morning, or sometimes a question also has so much instruction in it that not only the cost but also the quality can be associated. The limits, right? These limits have to do with rate limits. With that, there are some models that limit the number of tokens, the number of requests per minute, since if we are going to make a set of aggregated items or as agents, if there are also multiple conversations happening on your account, it depends on your account classification, how much you have already spent, and what category, which is the tier they place you in at the moment. The input-output, as we have already mentioned, knowing the different models well, not just knowing they exist, but understanding, for example, within OpenAI, gosh, here it might be better to use a 4.0 mini, here maybe I use a 4.0 directly, here I can use this other one, Anthropic better for this, better for that, and this diversity, here you might be using a Dify, which allows you to have connectors of this nature like a Gemini, a Llama, and knowing well the training, the purpose, the benchmark that each model has. Worked on, responded better, you can use in specific situations so that you also have a more specific delivery than using everything, for example, a 4.0, a GPT-4. And then with this, you start getting the notion between assistants and agents. The set of assistants intercommunicating in the role of agents, which brings me a response. And the chat flow allows this to be done. I can also do this with an association of assistants only with OpenAI using Kommo's flow. It might be a bit more laborious, but it's possible in case you don't want to deal with orchestrators. And then, yes, speaking of orchestrators, Dify, for example, the fact of sometimes not knowing, not mastering, restricts just this primary thought of question and answer, as if the business were to be sufficient, the question and answer, all possible forms. Because a conversation ends up moving, it ends up changing its course, needing other factors. So using a basic chatbot like in OpenAI or a chat flow, which will allow you to connect with multiple LLMs, you can make requests with APIs in banks, in tools, in Kommo itself, making use of codes if you need to do a parser in JSON, for example. Then parameters, question classifiers that we put in your bot as intention, but in Dify, you can use as question classifiers in a more comprehensive, more practical, much more agile and efficient way. You can use variables in conversations. You can interchange these variables throughout the conversational flows. Also send data from how as a variable inside your Diffie so that it handles this or receives this externally. So all these possibilities for those who know how to program, for those who master these points, can also respond adequately to business challenges. And you have dozens of possible tools there to be integrated, like the current time itself, which will give you a notion of the time and day. The local date and time at that moment among connectors like Google, database service APIs, web scraper APIs, and many others that can enrich your business research, like for example a Google Maps, if that were the case, or even to banks where you already have data. Besides Diffie, if you have the necessary conditions to use Langflow, if that's the point, so that you have the complete view of these agents, if you are already at that point. And still about LLMs, we have the possibility here to understand well the limitations. How are you handling image and audio? How is the quality of the document or documents? Are we putting a bunch of lost PDFs or are we treating this data better? In bond.txt, leaving not only in bond.txt but also within it in an elaborate way so that our LLM is capable of vectorizing it adequately, understanding the limits, as we mentioned above, of the token limit, rate limit of fees. How far does the research go? We noticed many people, basic instructions asking, go to such site, see the information, then actually using a web scraper, sweeping the data or a database. How many extensive spreadsheets are placed, wanting then that the LLM solves the data and doesn't understand much the principle of how GPT works. due to a matter of probabilistic inferences of returning the embedding, and from that embedding generating a response. So these points are limiting in the process. You have there the part of knowledge with RAG, which are different sources. You extrapolate the intelligence resource of the own, let's talk here about GPT, of that LLM, and make more contexts of external data, be it as a bank, files, other sources of information, so that this comes so that GPT can process. Pay attention to the formats, the chunks which are the pieces you have access to. For example, within Dify, you can manage these chunks or cut chunks which are pieces of up to 500 tokens, for example. Manipulate this well if it's a vectorial or hybrid order research, or by words. So you have how to choose models of this form of data research. We have, for example, Cohere among OpenAI's own embeddings. So by delving into this, you bring more efficiency or more effectiveness in the return of the information, in case you are working with a slightly larger volume of data within the knowledge part, that is, within the knowledge part. And optimization testing many times, I would say that if you test 10, test 40, almost 4 times more, right? A figure of speech here, so that you really have certainty of each point of what is happening and in the diversities and adversities, so that your assistant is really capable of meeting what is expected within the initial expectations. We make the notes that this helps you to learn better, to understand better, and also doing the fine-tuning, which is precisely this refinement, this refining of the specific learning of your business, so that the AI then, in fact, learns with you even more beyond what it was trained. In the case of LLM, it learns even more about your business. It not only responds or just follows instructions, it can also learn with you. In this way, all these points once seen and treated can certainly meet the projects. I know that maybe some of these fronts may seem too much, but I would say that with all certainty, AI projects involving this type of action are still not for amateurs. It still requires knowledge, although it is accessible to everyone, very valuable, but it is not for amateurs. It does require content, a minimum reasonable experience, so that we face complex projects. Face projects where we have the client on our side. Here at ByteBio, we are available to assist you. We have end-to-end services, not only in providing some tools, some APIs, but in consulting, implementations, end-to-end for the business, not just artificial intelligence, but everything that involves the part of digital transformation with AI, everything that is involved with the data part, involving CRMs, among other possible integrations. So count on us. At any point, we are at your disposal.